All right, guys, you ready? If you feel it, chase it. Twisters. Let's talk about it. All right. If you've been following me or watching any of these videos for any length of time, you probably can guess what I'm going to say about this already off the top. And before I say it, I want to say this. If I'm being honest, if you feel it, chase it is one of those lines that is designed, it feels like, to get you pumped for the proceedings. And it did that for me. What I was going to say is that I was not looking forward to this movie. How many times have you heard me say that? I wasn't looking forward to this. Really had no intention of seeing it. It just, as a last minute thought, I just thought the day before or the week of release, I just said, oh, you know what? Let me give it a shot. So I saw it and I enjoyed the movie a lot more than I thought I was going to. Already going in, my initial feeling was the original's better. And that's just all there is to it. And having seen this movie now, I can see that I can appreciate the first movie. I still appreciate the first movie, but I did like this one. And just get into some of my thoughts about this movie. You'll have to forgive. There is, summer activity going on around here. But that's what's happening. It's summertime. And as such, summertime brings about summer blockbuster movies. And this movie falls into that category. What do we have going on? This movie is about, like the original, if you've seen it, it's about a group of storm chasers trying to catch some tornadoes and see what's going on. The difference is where the original was about trying to speed response times for people to have better preparedness to protect themselves against tornado damage. This one, ultimately, the goal is around how do you neutralize a tornado? However realistic or unrealistic that sounds, that ultimately is the goal of these storm chasers in this, or at least one side of storm chasers. That's what the goal is. Led by Daisy Edgar Ridley, who plays Kate. She's the person who we see much of the action through. She's experienced a tragedy, and after some time away from storm chasing, she's brought back into the fold by her old college buddy, played by Anthony Ramos. I forget his character's name, but Javier, played by Anthony Ramos. She's lured back into the world of storm chasing by him, and along the way, they meet Glenn Powell's character, whose name I can't remember, who is a part of the opposing storm chasing team. He's a YouTuber, and they're, Wild West cowboys and stuff. They're out there trying to wrangle some tornadoes and stuff. And that's the sort of crux of the movie. That's what you've got going on. Along the way, some hijinks ensue. There are lots of tornado sightings, and it's a thrill ride, and with a bit of a love story developing in the middle, and that's what we have. Now, positives. This movie is fun. Ultimately, it knows how to have fun. And I think for a summer action movie, I've said this about a couple movies that I've seen this summer, recent releases, that I think for the summertime, I think that's what you want. I think you need that. You've got all this time during the year, if you're a student going to school or work, whatever your life is before the summer months hit, there's enough real life busyness, crazy stuff happening outside of the summer months. So when you get to the summertime, you want to have some space where you can unwind and relax a little bit. And I think when the summer blockbuster season rolls around, you want to just enjoy. And I think if you're not thinking too much about the movie, you can still have a good time. Even if you get, it's a bonus if you get a summer blockbuster movie that gives you something to think about, to chew on, in a way that's more cerebral or whatever it is, but you don't always get that. That's okay. And Twisters is that kind of movie. It's fun, it's big, it's loud, and it's also has some moments of intimacy between the characters, and then and that's also nice to have moments that bring you into the human drama, because that's what you are really, as a, that's what you want to connect to that. I've heard this movie talked, so that's great. That's a good thing about it. This movie has that, and that's a good thing about it. I've heard this movie discussed as a universal monster movie, and I hadn't thought about it like that. I was watching a discussion recently from the filmmakers. That was a comparison that was made, and how this movie is essentially a monster movie. And I know when I think of monster movies in general, I look at them like disaster movies. And so it's interesting to see that connection. I've never heard monster movies being talked about, or actually disaster movies being talked about as monster movies from that perspective. But I think it totally makes sense. And I think that is something that gives it some oomph, some character, which the original had this too. But I think just having that approach makes it more. It makes you invested in it more, looking at it like that. For some reason, I think what that reason is that something about it feels personal. If you're a human in a similar situation, we can't help but personify these different things. So the tornado is doing what it's going to do, but something about it does feel like, oh, these tornadoes are messing everything up and I want to just get them. And so I think particularly more so for this movie than in the previous film, that there's something about the very idea of wanting to neutralize a tornado, like having some sort of human control over what Mother Nature is doing, makes it already more personal. It's like Godzilla tearing up a city and then humans shoot rockets. Humans are physically doing something to try and stop him from destroying everything. They could do nothing and allow Godzilla to destroy the city, but that they make an attempt makes it that much more arresting. And I think the same is true particularly for this movie. At the same time, though, that also makes it feel a little bit less like something about it feels, I don't know, watered down. The idea that you could stop a natural disaster by human means, human tools, human ingenuity, I don't know if I fully buy it. But again, that's me thinking a little bit about it. If I don't think about it, it also feels more science fiction-y in that way, and slightly less grounded. But the rest of the movie is still quite a grounded affair, I think, for the most part. The acting across the board is solid. Anthony Ramos is good. I think Daisy Edgar Ridley is good. She has wonderful moments of emotion, and she's got a bit of sass, and I think and some pep, and that's cool to see from her. And I think obviously a lot of the conversation is circling around Glenn Powell and his star power at the moment, and he's charming as all get out. Just beautiful. He's a beautiful man, and he's hard to look away from. And I think that's the difference in this movie compared to the previous film, the 1996 film. This film has fairly well-known people, whereas the original, they were known, but not. I don't know that they were on the same level as Glenn Powell and Anthony Ramos from Hamilton fame originally. Most people know him from Transformers. People who don't know anything about Hamilton, but Anthony Ramos was originally Hamilton, and then In the Heights, the movie, and then of course Transformers and everything. And he's doing some more stuff. It's cool to see him doing more things. Daisy Edgar Ridley's been around. She's been in some things. But Glenn Powell is the sort of hot topic right now. He's a. If you wondered, if you remember, I don't know if you remember the '90s song "Where Have All the Cowboys Gone?" And if you're still wondering, this year gave us a couple cowboys. We got Kevin Costner's new movie Horizon that came out this year, and then reported the part 2 that will be coming at some point. And then Glenn Powell. So if you're wondering where the Cowboys are, they're here. And particularly in Twisters, Glenn Powell leads a team of, so they're sort of wild cow people, cowboys and cowgals out there trying to wrangle some tornadoes and stuff but during this particular storm season that they're active, trying to do what they're doing on YouTube. And he embodies the quintessential American, all-American cowboy who's got he's got a bit of a he's got a bit of an ego, and he can back it up. And like I said, he's a beautiful man. He's got all the perks of he'd be great in a full-on Western. And while we're on the idea of Westerns, that's one element I think that's a new wrinkle to add to the story about a group teams of storm chasers, that it feels more like this is like it's a big rodeo, and Glenn Powell is particularly suited for that. For what else is good about it? I think the spectacle of it is fine. And I was watching it going, this is the kind of movie that you have to see on the biggest screen possible. And when it releases on digital, you want to have a big screen or some kind of projector to watch at home with a decent sound system, because this is the one thing that's great about movies like this: disaster movies, monster movies, movies that have a good deal of spectacle and scope to them. A large screen is the way to really get as close as possible to the feeling of what it should feel like to have a really immersive experience. And I think Twisters fits that bill, because the action sequences they're big, and again, they're loud, and they're expansive. You get a real sense of the scope and also the destructive force of the tornadoes. It's something to see, and you can only really appreciate it. You can appreciate it, I think, on smaller screens too. But I think you do lose something when you're not seeing it on a large-ish screen. So keep that in mind, just for future reference, for viewings of this movie down the line. It's one of those movies that definitely screams see on a big screen. So something to think about. My issues with the movie, I think, primarily come down to how much this feels like the original, even though it's not. It's being talked about as this sort of sequel or a reboot of Twisters. And I think really what feels better for me as a viewer to think about this movie, a better way to think about it feels more like looking at it like an anthology entry. This is a new story with completely new characters, and that none of them directly tie into people we've met, the characters we've met in the original film. And I like that, actually. So many of these years later sequels or proper films that take place in the same universe have ties, all these direct ties to either main characters we've met or something. And I like that the connections we do get to the original are very small and don't really have anything to do with any of the characters we meet. There are certain machines, tools, and things that tie directly back to the original, certain Easter eggs like T-shirts and certain designs and things. That's cool. And I think that if anything, that's the sort of the best way to have it sort of spiritually link back to the original film. The Dorothy unit, if you remember the original film, those machines that were used to help get full scans of the inside of a tornado to get better data so that people could see how to track it. Seeing that machine again was kind of cool. It made instantly you go, there's the Dorothy from the, I like that it was just that. There wasn't a lot of threads directly tied to the original. Another way it felt like the original was it seemed to stick to a formula. There is a structure to how the twisters are presented. There is an escalation for the levels of how major they get from the F1 or EF1 in this movie. The rating system has changed. So EF1 through to EF5. And you get examples of each in this movie. And I don't know that it needed to do that. In that way, it reminded me of Top Gun Maverick. If you've seen that movie and you've seen the original Top Gun, you know that Maverick in a lot of ways feels like it's Top Gun, but remixed, updated. For modern times, you can watch the movies back to back, and it feels like there's a formula that Maverick hit with some slight alterations, some different seasonings added, and I think Twisters feels similarly. I would have preferred if Twisters was remixed more, and didn't have. I would have even kept maybe you got instead of 5 Twisters, maybe you get 3. 3 big, one regular one and 2 big ones spaced out throughout the movie. It's like well, I was gonna say Pacific Rim, the first one, where there's some decent fights, some stuff been there. You have 3 major battles with some skirmishes on the side, but I think Twisters would have benefited from less Twisters and more character stuff. Maybe that's just a thought, just so it didn't feel too close to the original. The other thing that bothered me was there's this sort of pseudo quasi love triangle thing happening, which is fine. There's a version of that kind of in the original. I think that there's some element of it felt like it was you don't need to have this. How come these characters can't just be who they are and not have any sort of romantic tension or whatever? I mean, not have something feel like it's forced. I'm okay with the sexual tension between Glenn Powell's character and Daisy Edgar Ridley's character. That's great. They had great chemistry. But some part of it felt like it wasn't as organic. You got lovely looking people who are immediately, you just know, there's going to be something going on. I didn't like that was going to be something that I expected. I would have preferred if it didn't have that. You can have a summer blockbuster movie that doesn't have a ton of undercurrents of relationship-y things being forced. You could have it feel more organic, and then have it not be, I don't know, it doesn't always have to be realized either. Not saying that that's what happens here, but there are elements of it that feel like that. And I'm like, well, that's just a small thing. That's an issue, something that I grapple with in movies like that. I'm okay if it feels organic and feels earned. Having said that, though, I do appreciate the dynamic between Glenn Powell's character and Daisy Edgar Ridley's character. I think there's a real dance happening, and it's nice to see. Piggybacking on the love triangle situation, I was disappointed that Anthony Ramos's character Javi was sidelined in that dynamic. I wanted there to be more of him to make it feel more like if you're suggesting a love triangle, this person should be more involved, and I think that I was disappointed by that. But hey, whatever. At the end of the day, the movie's not really about that. It's about the Twisters. That's the star of the show. But it's not really when you have Glenn Powell. So the Twisters are the star, but they let's be honest, they play second fiddle to Glenn Powell. And whatever else is dumping up with him, that's going to be what the focus is. So that's what you have. That's what you got going on. There's a lot of talk about this movie being better than the first one. And I don't know that I agree with that. Look, we're all entitled to our opinions. That's okay. clearly whoever thinks this movie is better than the original is wrong, like flat out wrong. I think what actually is the case is that you prefer this movie to the original. That's the more accurate way to look at it, because you can't tell me that this movie is objectively better. Like, yes, there's better technology being used for this film. There are better filmmaking tools and things that allow the process to be smoother and perhaps even safer. But you can't say that the product is better than the original when it's essentially the same movie. At its core, it's the same movie. No, I'm you're not wrong if you think it's better. If you think it's better, that's great. Personally, I feel like when we say that, what we mean is that this is you have a preference, and that's okay. It's so difficult with these movies and art because it's subjective. You have a preference about what you like and what you don't like, and I think those things that's a part of the discussion. For my money, I prefer the original, but like I said at the start of this review, I did have a lot of fun with this movie. I thought I enjoyed it a lot better than I thought it was going to. It's hard to not get behind these characters, particularly when we have three leads who are as likable and charismatic as the ones we have here in Anthony Ramos, Daisy Edgar Ridley, and Glenn Powell. It's hard to not root for that. So I say definitely go check it out if you haven't seen it. It's another great sort of entry to the summer blockbuster season. And if you haven't seen the original in 1996, I implore you to give that one a look. I think it still holds up today, effects wise, but also just acting wise. There's a lot of good acting. There's a lot of great stuff in that movie, so definitely check that out if you haven't seen it. And I think that's going to be it for this review. There's a lot of things to say. I'll probably figure out a way to. I'll probably get I haven't been writing these reviews lately, but I got to get my reviews written and back up somewhere where they can be read. So maybe I'll say some more stuff there. But I think for now I'll leave it here. Thank you for watching, and come on back for the next reviews. We've got more coming up pretty soon. So take it easy. And lastly, don't face your fears. Write them. But then that's an aside. That's another cool line in the movie, however cliche it sounds. But how can you ride your fears if you don't face them? Don't you have to you got to come up against them at some point before you ride them, right? I mean, whatever. Something I'm thinking about. Again, I'm trying to think too much, but sometimes that's what happens. Your brain just gets going and whatever. So don't face your fears. Write them. See you in the next one.